Hello and welcome to Fantastic History. I'm Clay.
I'm Sarah.
We're a husband and wife duo who enjoy telling each other about amazing events, people, and mysteries throughout history. So today I want to revisit a topic from nearly 40 episodes ago.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah, back on episode 38, I told you and the listeners about America's first female detective.
Yes.
And the startup of the Pinkerton National Detective Agency.
Mm-hmm.
When we last left Pinkerton, he, with the help of Kate Warren, had just snuck Abraham Lincoln through Baltimore, where there were plans to have him assassinated.
Yes.
They got him through, having escorted Lincoln safely to his inauguration. Pinkerton found himself in the good graces of the federal government.
Understandably so.
Yeah. So in 1871, the Department of Justice contracted Pinkerton to find and prosecute people who violated federal law.
Okay.
And this was sort of the beginnings of the Secret Service.
Oh, wow. Okay. I never really thought about that. That's neat.
Yeah, but they weren't. They were just contracted.
Sure.
They weren't like they weren't the real Secret Service yet.
Right.
Now at this point, Pinkerton had offices all across the U.S. and they were busy, but the most dangerous work was out west.
Sure.
Railroads hired Pinkerton agents to keep their trains safe from bandits in the lawless land.
Jesse James, boys.
But there was another problem that these business tycoons are facing, and Pinkerton was down to help them with that problem as well. Union busting and strike busting.
Great.
And this type of work would go on to define the private eyes and the public eye. But because those stories are going to take longer to flesh out, we're going to cover them in a third Pinkerton episode.
Oh my God.
I only mention it because the timeline of these events sort of overlap each other.
Okay.
And I didn't want people thinking we're going to be talking about one thing. We're going to skip past chronologically where other things would happen.
Sure.
So this is not a linear discussion of the history of the Pinkerton Detective Agency. We'll come back to the Molly Maguires later.
Okay.
As I said earlier, in the mid-1800s, Pinkerton were primarily private investigators and security for hire.
Mm-hmm.
So they were used by railroads in the Wild West. They were finding specific trouble coming from some gangs.
Yes.
Including the James Younger gang led by Jesse James.
Hey!
Yeah. And the Wild Bunch.
Oh my God.
Led by Butch Cassidy.
Yes.
Now, all these people have an aura of a folk hero around them, right?
For sure.
But let's set the record straight from the outset before we get into it. Jesse James and his gang were not good guys.
No. Although, you may remember, that was John Dillinger's hero.
Yes. But when you know about Jesse James,
Yeah.
it doesn't come across as very good.
No.
Because they started their criminal careers during the Civil War on the side of the Confederacy.
Right.
And they joined a guerrilla group of bushwhackers led by the infamous Bloody Bill Anderson.
What a name, though.
And this guy was sadistic.
Yeah.
In 1864, his group captured a train full of Union soldiers and civilians, and they murdered everyone on the train.
What the fuck?
And scalped them.
Ew.
This was a common thing they did.
Sure.
It's referred to as the Centralia Massacre.
Ugh.
And is not the only incident of reckless murder and destruction caused by Bloody Bill.
Yeah.
After the war ended, most of these fighters accepted their fate, the outcome of the war, but others couldn't lie down and accept defeat.
Clearly, that's still happening.
Yeah, so gangs started to form out of discontent and victimization.
Right.
Yeah, so Jesse James and his brother Frank lashed out in this way.
Mm-hmm.
On February 13th, 1866, the first bank robbery since the end of the Civil War occurred in Liberty, Missouri. And it's believed to also be Jesse's first robbery.
Oh, wow.
And they made off with about $60,000. Then in 1869, Jesse and his brother Frank entered the Daviess County Savings Association in Gallatin, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
The other two people there were the clerk at the bank and a lawyer. Jesse asked the cashier for change, and while he was distracted, he pulled out a gun and shot the man in the head.
Oh my God.
Then shot the lawyer in the arm as he was escaping. So very violent.
Yikes.
And I think Jesse, it might have been Frank, grabbed a portfolio before booking it out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently their target had not been the cash. They had been informed somehow that the clerk that they had just killed was the same man that had killed Bloody Bill Anderson years later.
Oh.
So they were out for revenge.
Right.
But it wasn't. It
Uh-oh.
was the wrong guy.
Oh, no.
And to make matters worse, the portfolio they grabbed was just useless bank documents. There was no cash. So
Great.
the whole thing was a bust.
Nailing it.
But I just wanted to include it because it really highlights how different someone like Jesse James was to someone like John Dillinger.
Right. Yeah.
But Jesse James definitely wanted to be seen as a hero. His robberies would become more loud and bombastic.
I feel like step one to become a hero, don't scalp people.
That's a good way, but they weren't doing this anymore. They
Okay.
weren't like mutilizing the bodies or anything.
Oh, so he has completed step one. Great. Okay, proceed.
Perhaps. But I think when you're talking about John Dillinger's hero,
Right.
it really comes out of this part where it's like he's being very bold and bombastic and gloating and being
Sure.
loud and wanting the attention and getting people to know who he is.
This is like the Jesse James people remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he even left his own press releases behind at his robberies. And now
Respect.
part of why this worked so well was because he had a sympathizer in the media. John Edwards was a pro-Confederate journalist, and he started the Kansas City Times, and he liked Jesse James.
Okay.
And he would portray the gang as a group of modern-day Robin Hood and his merry men.
Right.
And he did this in the paper. And as heroes against the tyrannical Union and all this stuff.
Sure.
So it really created the folklore of Jesse James
Yeah.
in the media. And the media blitz worked because we have half of our recollection of Jesse James is this sort of folk hero. And the other half is not.
Yeah.
Well, our story picks up in 1871 when Jesse's gang hits a bank in Croydon, Iowa, I think it is pronounced. It turns out it to be a pretty small haul, but this might have been the first robbery where they were showing off to the crowd that had assembled, boasting about themselves and showing off, like what I was talking about before. This
Sure.
might be the first time they did this. So the bank reached out to Pinkerton to track down the bandits. Agent Robert Pinkerton was sent, and his name is not a coincidence. He was the son of Alan Pinkerton.
Wow. Okay.
It seems that Alan was aware of Jesse James and the high-profile gangs in the area, and he wanted to show a strong hand against them, so he sent his son to go check it out. So Robert and the sheriff got to work and tracked the gang back to Missouri. But unfortunately, Robert was not able to apprehend them and was wounded by a gunshot during the pursuit. And Jesse, probably sensing trouble coming from them because now Pinkerton was involved,
Right.
he made the bold choice to write a letter to the editor. And it was published in the Kansas City Times,
Sure.
stating that he was being persecuted. He was innocent. It was those damn dirty Republicans that were trying to, pull down the Confederates and people who were sympathetic to that, and that he was an innocent man just caught up. And meanwhile, John Edwards, who was working at a different paper at the time, he writes a whopping 20-page piece glorifying Jesse James as a hero.
Now, how the hell are you getting 20 pages of space in a newspaper? That is wild. Can
Yeah.
you imagine?
I really don't know how that worked.
It was like his personal newspaper that he printed in his home. That's nuts.
If anyone knows a little bit more about that, I'd love to know because I don't. But
So weird.
But they were definitely in cahoots with this media blitz.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess Jesse James knew how to do it. The gang continued to rob and kill innocent, unarmed people and make radical claims in the media about how they were stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. There's no evidence they were ever given to the poor.
Right. Well, they're the poor.
Uh-huh. all the while Republicans were the real criminals against the people. In 1874, the James Younger gang committed one of the most famous robberies in the Old West. They halted a train by setting a fire on the tracks. When it came to a stop, they robbed the passengers and a safe. Now, the legend says they did not rob women or working men, and they determined this by checking their hands.
Oh, right.
I'm pretty skeptical
Right.
of that part, but they made off with the equivalent of about $280,000 in today's money.
Mm-hmm.
So afterwards, the Adams Express Company, which owned the safe, hired Pinkerton to track down the thieves again. So they were at it again. This time, Pinkerton set out agent Joseph Witcher. However, on March 11th of that year, Witcher's body was found on a rural road, dead by gunshots and half-eaten by wild hogs.
Oh, my.
Bad scene.
Yeah. Ew.
Pinkerton agents John Boyle and Lewis Lull, along with the sheriff, continued to track the gang until they crossed paths with John and Jim Younger,
Okay.
the titular characters from the Younger James gang.
Yeah.
The Youngers immediately attacked the agents. So a gun shootout
Right.
immediately broke out, and the sheriff was killed almost immediately, and Lull was wounded, but Lull managed to kill John, and Boyle and Jim escaped the gunfight unscathed. Lull would shortly succumb to his wounds and die as well, but the incident marked a major turning point because Pinkerton had now lost 3 agents to the gang and hadn't caught them. So things were starting to get a little bad.
That's embarrassing.
Embarrassing, not just for Pinkerton, but for the government.
Sure.
Like you can't catch these folks.
Yeah.
You can't catch these criminals.
Yeah.
You're useless. So Pinkerton began to take it a bit personally. Like, I'm going to get these guys, and they're going to pay for all this. The eagerness led agents to James's farm on the night of January 25th, 1875, where they thought Jesse and Frank were hiding. At around midnight, agents surrounded the house and lobbed 2 flares inside. They were trying to illuminate the dark house and get an eye on who was inside. But then something unexpected happened. A loud explosion came from the house, from inside. And Pinkerton agents later said that the inhabitants threw the flares into a fireplace.
Oh.
Where they heated up in the coals and exploded.
Whoa.
Well, the blast killed Jesse's 8-year-old half-brother Archie Samuel.
Oh, no.
And blew the arm off his mother. So that was bad.
Yeah, that's real bad.
And
way to go, Dick.
I don't know if it's worse of all, but Jesse and Frank weren't there.
Oh.
Now, at first, Pinkerton denied their involvement.
You would.
But there was evidence that they had been there. So they later told that version of the story.
Mm-hmm.
In time, another version of the story had come to light via historians who found letters from Allen Pinkerton in the Library of Congress.
Oh.
Pinkerton said about the planned raid on the farmhouse, "I hear that the Jameses and Youngers are desperate men, and that when we meet, it must be death for one or both of us. There's no use in talking. They must die."
Wow. Okay. Well.
And then in another letter, when he's giving like the final instructions for the raid, he says, "Above everything, destroy the house. Let the men take no risks. Burn the house down."
Jesus.
So, there it is.
I mean, surely they knew that there were women and children in the house.
I would assume so.
Oh, sick.
But they were desperate, and it seems that they were very desperate. But this attack made things considerably worse for everyone, probably everybody except Jesse James.
Right.
Because he and his family were viewed with sympathy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that they killed a young boy.
Yep.
They maimed his mom.
Yep.
And Pinkerton and the state of Missouri had failed yet again, and this time in spectacular fashion.
Oof.
So much that Pinkerton ended his pursuit of the younger James gang entirely
Good.
because they weren't getting it done.
Yeah.
So that's the end of the story for Pinkerton, but not for Jesse James.
Certainly
obviously.
not.
He continued to rob and proclaim his innocence at the same time until an ill-fated robbery in Northfield, Minnesota, which would see two of the members of his gang shot and killed by armed citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And only Jesse and Frank managed to escape. They then laid low for about 3 years, and Frank retired.
Jiminy.
But Jesse started up again. But the world had changed in that time,
Right.
interestingly, because Democrats had gained significant political power. If you recall, back then, Democrats were the conservative
It was flip-flopped.
and Republican. Yeah. So Democrats were gaining more power. The old wounds of the Confederacy had sort of healed a bit.
Okay.
And it wasn't just he just wasn't getting the same sympathy and attention as before.
Right.
Then on April 3rd, 1882, Jesse is at home and he's looking at the mantle of his home.
Mm-hmm.
And behind him, the coward Robert Ford puts a bullet in the back of his head.
Yes, he does.
He's arrested and convicted of murder, but immediately pardoned by the governor.
Yep.
Because they had planned the assassination ahead of time in exchange for the pardon and a cash reward.
Literally Judas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah.
His mother, who survived losing her arm, would die in 1911 after charging tourists a quarter to take a pebble from her son's grave in their front yard.
Weird.
And that ends the story of Jesse James,
Oof.
pretty much. And the bumbling pursuit by the Pinkertons.
Well, I will say Robert Ford went on to become basically a sideshow attraction,
Yes.
which is so strange. So I will say most of my knowledge about this comes from the movie,
Yeah.
The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford, which was it was a very well done movie, but it was so boring. It just feels like it's 6 hours long.
Yeah.
But I did learn a lot.
Not a lot happens.
No.
Not a lot happened in the Wild West.
Well, that's certainly not true.
So, but what about Butch Cassidy and the Wild Bunch?
See, now that's a good movie. That's a good ass movie.
Yeah.
I've seen that one a bunch of times.
So Cassidy got started later, around 1890, in Colorado, robbing banks. And among his Wild Bunch were some great names.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and get them, but I might mispronounce a couple, and you can help me out with
I'm
those.
so excited.
William Ellsworth Lay, and his nickname was Elsie.
Oh, cute.
Then you got Ben Tall Texan Kilpatrick. And I love that the names are like, some of them are descriptive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always fun. You got Harvey Kid Curry Logan.
Okay.
And you got the most well-known Harry
Mm-hmm.
Lonabaugh, the Sundance Kid.
Yes.
They really took off in 1896, hitting banks in Montana, South Dakota, Nevada, Utah, like all across the West.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy. Their base was Cassidy's Ranch, located at a place called Hole in the Wall, which is a naturally fortified pass and just a great place for bandits. The Wild Bunch would move on to robbing trains, and during one of these train heists, a sheriff was killed. So Pinkerton was hired to investigate the murder. And they sent Tom Horn, who is described in my source as a killer for hire under Pinkerton employment.
Whoa.
So that's interesting. I didn't get a chance to look too deep into that, but I found that to be very interesting.
That is very interesting.
Well, Tom worked with a Pinkerton agent named Charlie Siringo, and Siringo was able to become friends with a woman named Elfie Landusky, who was carrying Kid Curry's brother's child.
Uh-oh.
So it gets a little complicated.
Oh, my.
But through this friendship, Siringo was trying to infiltrate the gang.
Right.
But it seemed he wasn't able to get close enough to get a hold of them because their robberies continued.
Mm-hmm.
and their antics were capturing the public interest. Kind of like Jesse James, but I think it was also because people were clamoring for this exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Papers were selling, and people wanted to read about these exciting encounters, but Pinkerton was still trying to get a hold of them. In 1900, Cassidy posed for a picture with 4 other members of the Wild Bunch, and Pinkerton managed to obtain a copy. And this is the famous Fort Worth 5 picture.
Mm-hmm.
It became a common sight because it was used on all their wanted posters.
Right.
And when you see it, because we're going to put it up on Instagram and everything,
Yes.
when you see it, it's funny because it looks exactly like the stereotypical shots, like the ones you get from like Gatlinburg.
Right. I have a great one of my mom and my 4 aunts. It's really wonderful.
Yeah, it looks just like that. Well, over the following year, they continued their robberies, but more and more members of their gang were being killed and arrested.
Mm-hmm.
So they said in 1901, they said, you know what, let's get out of Dodge.
Yeah.
So Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid fled to Buenos Aires, Argentina,
Yes.
where they settled in a 4-room cabin on 15,000 acres.
Not bad if you can get it.
No, they probably got it for a dime. I don't know. You'd think they would lay low and be quiet and live a nice, quiet life.
If I could get a 15,000 acre farm, y'all would never hear from me again. I mean,
Yeah.
you would, honey, and our kid, but like pretty much nobody else.
Right, because they had escaped Pinkerton. They escaped the law.
Oh, yeah.
Good to go, right?
Never.
No. They continued to rob banks in South America.
Yeah.
God. Well, here's what happened. 2 American bandits robbed a payroll courier and fled to a boarding house in a nearby mining town.
Mm-hmm.
The owner of the house was suspicious of them, so he contacted the law, which contacted and got a hold of the Bolivian Army Cavalry.
Yeah.
That evening, the house was surrounded by soldiers, police, and other officials to arrest the Americans. When the suspected bandits opened fire, and a gunfight ensued.
Mm-hmm.
During the following standoff at around 2 a.m., the soldiers heard a scream from inside the house, followed by a gunshot, and then another gunshot. When they entered the house the following morning, they found the 2 men dead. It's believed that one shot the other in the head and then shot themselves.
Right.
But the men were also found with other bullet holes. So they were probably injured.
Right.
Like we can't get out of this. We're just got to put ourselves out of our misery.
Right.
However, the police were not able to identify the men. And the following years, DNA has been tested and has not provided a positive match when tested with Cassidy and Longabaw's living relatives.
Mm-hmm.
So it's thought that these were different bandits.
Right.
And the real Cassidy and Sundance Kid hid the rest of their lives in obscurity.
15,000 acre farm, brother. Like, you don't got to do nothing.
Well, Cassidy's sister claims that he returned to the States,
Mm-hmm.
but just laid low.
Right.
But we don't know. But whatever happened, we do know that Pinkertons did not get their men.
Suck it. Honestly.
Mm.
But that's why the movie has that ambiguous ending that it does. I don't know if you remember.
I actually have not seen it.
Okay, I thought I was remembering that, and I was like trying to suppress that fact from myself because I love it so much. So the end of the movie, they're like, holed up in the house, like the army's surrounding them. There's this big shootout, and it ends with them deciding like we're just gonna go for it, and they start to like turn to run out. And the movie just ends. Like, you never see them actually run out towards the gunfire. It just kind of ends. They don't want to show them dying.
Yeah.
Because we don't actually know that they did. I mean, of
It's
course,
true.
they have died now. But at the time.
Well, they surely survived because there was a Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid 2. The Search for the Pirate's Treasure.
Uh-huh.
I didn't see that one either. But that is the real story of some of the most infamous gangs and outlaws in the Wild West. and how Pinkerton tried and failed to catch them.
Your girl loves a bank robber. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
I'm very happy.
And thank you for listening as well. If you want to check us out on social media, we're on TikTok at Fantastic History Podcast and Instagram at Fantastic HPod. And if you want to send us an email, we are fantastichistorypod@gmail.com. And if you enjoyed this episode and the other episodes we've done, I think we're on episode 77 now.
Crikey.
Why don't you leave a review and a rating?
Why don't you?
Why don't you? Come on. It's good. We're also on YouTube now.
Oh, that's right.
Now the video is not there's not really a lot of visual aid yet, but you can find all of them on YouTube if that's more convenient for you.
And you've made some fun YouTube shorts also.
Yeah, we're posting more content on TikTok and YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels stories, and we're trying to supplement the podcast with some additional stuff. So you might see some stuff on there that you don't hear on here.
Pay attention to us, please.
Please do. And thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.